Some of these notes are not like the others. They seem a little out of place. These are non-chord tones, and they are exactly where they need to be. This is Music Student 101. Here are your hosts, Jeremy Burns and Matthew Scott Phillips.
Okay, welcome back to Music Student 101, everybody. So, check it out. We got this listener mail. Jesse from Virginia is a guitarist. And has a question about some sus chords.
Right.
Because we talked a little bit about chords, but we haven't gotten into these just yet.
Yeah, whether sus chords, also known as suspended chords, were considered triads.
Well, yeah, here's the question, actually. It's, are sus2 and sus4 chords not considered triads because there is no third?
Right.
I wasn't sure because they contain 3 notes.
Right. Well, and we have responded. Hopefully, that response was satisfactory. The short answer is yes, because those suspended tones in sus2 chords or sus4 chords or whatever, those tones are considered to be something called non-chord tones.
Non-chord tones.
Yes, and this is what we're going to talk about today.
Wonderful.
And what you'll see is that non-chord tones, at least in the sort of traditional tonal harmony and also in the way popular music works and things, non-chord tones are sort of subservient to the tones that are part of whatever chord you're playing, right? So
I'm making a funny face when you say that.
Jeremy's making a funny face.
Subservient.
So let's start explaining some of this, all right?
But no, seriously, it's almost like this is almost a cosmic kind of situation because it's about time. We've been talking about getting into non-chord tones, and then this question comes along.
Yeah, so non-chord tones is basically just what it sounds like. It is when a tone is being played within a chord to which it does not belong.
Okay.
So if we're in D major, for example, and we're playing a D major chord that has D, F sharp, and A in it, we know this already, but all of a sudden there's like an E thrown in, that E, non-chord tone, right, doesn't belong there. So the basic concept is pretty simple, and you may be asking yourself, how do we get away with this? I thought that, the whole act of playing a D major chord was to be playing D, F sharp, and A, right? What is an E doing in there, or a G is doing in there? Well, those are what we call non-chord tones, and traditionally over the centuries, they have been handled very carefully. So this is concepts that go all the way back into the 1100s at least, when people first started singing different melodies, not just singing one melody all the time.
Polyphony?
What's that?
Polyphony?
Polyphony, yeah.
Even though we haven't gotten into polyphony yet?
Even though we haven't gotten
Long story short, more than one note at one time.
Yeah, long story short, more than... Yeah, okay.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Classic derail.
Classic derail. What was I saying? Oh, yeah. So it goes all the way back that far, and how we treated these and not have our music fall apart, is really what gave birth to a lot of the rules we've already talked about a lot, like no parallel fifths or octaves and things like that, because these tones are really what make music interesting, but they're also sort of rebels in a way, right? Because they don't belong to the chords. So there are consonant non-chord tones, right? And this is just chord tones that create intervals above the lowest note that are consonant with each other. For example, if I'm in D major and I play a B, and this 6, at least in our modern ears, this 6 is considered a consonant, right?
Yeah. Like the major 6.
Yeah, it's like the major 6. So this is a consonant non-chord tone versus a dissonant non-chord tone, like, for example, that E we played before, where this is considered a dissonant interval. So
Versus.
Yeah.
Kind of stings a little more.
Kind of stings, yeah.
Yeah, those non-chord tones can spice up a harmonic texture, by
Absolutely.
adding some variety to it.
Mm-hmm.
They can also add tension.
Tension, yes. They are generally considered dissonant to the chord that they're in, right?
Okay.
Or they are generally considered dissonant to the chord that's playing with them simultaneously. They're thought of as not belonging in that chord.
Alien to the chord.
Right.
To the triad. Or
Yeah,
the
and
subchord.
we sort of have to, like I said, deal with that in a way that spices up our music, that doesn't make our harmony fall apart. And that is sort of centered around the idea that these dissonances demand a resolution. So there's sort of a preparation of a dissonance and then a resolution of that dissonance, meaning basically that these non-chord tones have to find their way to a chord tone one way or another, which is what all that jargon means.
Okay. Yeah. Well, speaking of jargon, I came across something in my studies that was a little strange to me, and I think it made sense, but I'd love to hear your explanation.
Okay.
It was saying that non-chord tones are considered to be linear or horizontal rather than harmonic or vertical.
Right, yeah. So what that basically means is that this is an aspect of the melodic organization of music. It's sort of connective tissue between chords. It's not really a part of the chord itself. A non-chord tone, by definition, is some tone, some note that happened that's not a part of our chord. And the reason these things happen is because of melodic ideas, right?
Yeah.
And they can happen while a single chord is going on. Like I can, in which case this is a D major chord, and this G I played is non-chord tone, right, between two chord tones. And that last chord can sometimes change, so right? And but that G was still a passing tone because it was not a part of the chord that was playing at the time that it happened, right? And they're going to have to quote unquote resolve, which means they're going to have to find their way to a chord tone one way or another.
I think that this kind of thinking also allows for less cumbersome analysis.
Yeah, well, it helps you start thinking about music linearly, melodically, rather than harmonically, as a succession of chords, as a chord progression, which classical music, at least, was really not constructed that way. You mentioned polyphony earlier.
Yeah.
Really, this music was built out of four-voice polyphonic textures using the laws of counterpoint, what notes did and did not sound good together, right? And the idea that hey, there's that C, E, and G thing that comes along all the time because those three notes are consonant with each other. That must be a thing, and we'll call it a chord. That idea came later.
Yeah.
Really, this music is constructed in a horizontal fashion, not a vertical fashion. So it and learning to sort of shift yourself sideways to think horizontally will help you understand chord tones, certainly, because they're a complete horizontal thing, and it will also help you sort of understand the music in general.
I think that satisfies my curiosity.
Good. I'm here to serve.
Very good. Well, there's several different types of these non-chord tones, or NCTs, as they're often abbreviated.
Yes, there are.
And perhaps it makes sense just to go through them one by one.
Okay. Let's do that.
All right, let's kick off this discussion with the passing tone, shall we?
So the passing tone is essentially a dissonant tone that moves between two chord tones. So, for example, if I play D major and then had a little passing tone here going. So what I played there was just F sharp, G to A.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So our F sharp is a chord tone if we're playing a D major chord.
That's the third.
Yes. And then our A, also a chord tone if we're playing a D major chord. Yeah.
Fifth.
That G in there was a passing tone, which is literally just passing from a chord tone to another chord tone.
So passing.
Yeah.
Passing tone.
Passing tone, absolutely.
And it seems to be going in the same direction.
Yeah.
It seems to be going up. It's
Yeah,
ascending.
this is what I played was an ascending passing tone. You can also play a descending. Right, yeah.
Okay.
And then another passing tone. You know, so you can also see I'm already making little melodies here, right? Yeah.
So in this case, the passing tone is filling the space in between two notes that are a third apart.
Right. Filling two. You can also fill in the space of two notes that are a fourth apart. But it usually requires two passing tones in a row. So if I went, and I'm playing this A in my soprano voice here, and then D major chord. You know, and what I did was just go from that A, B, C sharp, D, you know, and just had two passing tones in a row.
Okay.
Totally fine to do that, you know. This could also happen between over a chord change. You could have, you know, sort of, you know.
Okay.
And it's still, I changed to the 5 chord there, but that motion was still the same, and we would still call that a passing tone because it was dissonant with the chord in which it happened, and then moved by stepwise motion to a resolution to a chord tone.
Cool.
Yeah.
Passing tones. I got a quick little example if you want to hear it.
Sure, yeah, let's do it.
I call this Lisa in the Sky with Cubic Zirconia.
I hear the passing tone. It's that second note in the melody, right?
Right here.
Yeah.
So this guy right here.
Yep. Sort of a do, re, mi thing going on, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or actually, it's a mi, fa, sol thing going on.
Mi, fa, sol.
Yeah. Yeah. Nice.
Thank you.
Yeah, very nice. Yeah, so that's basically our passing tone. And it's a fairly simple concept that gets fairly complicated. Yeah, it can get complicated, but anything else we want to say about that?
Well, I have that there's a double passing tone, and
yeah, we kind of covered that. Oh,
well,
no, we didn't. Yeah.
Kudos to you if you can just pull this out of your pocket. Hey, there you go.
2 passing tones at the same time.
2 passing tones. It's just as simple as that.
Yep.
Nicely done. Okay, and what we've been hearing so far have all been diatonic passing tones.
Right, diatonic passing tones, meaning that we're using scale degrees. So I'm passing from F sharp, which is a scale degree, G, which is a scale degree, to A, which is a scale degree. You know, assuming we're in the key of D major, which I am. A chromatic passing tone would be something like where I used a note outside of the D major scale. So, for example, if I went, what's a good one? Okay, so if I went from, this from a D major chord, and played A, D, G sharp, and then moved to.
Ooh, do that again.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah, so that would that G sharp would be considered a chromatic passing tone.
Great, because it doesn't belong to the scale of D major.
And there's no real limit to the number of passing tones you can have between two chord tones. So I could have just as easily made chromatic passing tones that, definitely a thing that can happen. So that's one kind, is the passing tone, which we tend to label PT. Another kind is the neighbor tone, which you'll see labeled as NT or just N sometimes. And this is really simple. All it does is move away from a chord tone and then right back to that original chord tone.
To the very same chord tone.
Right. So if I'm playing a D major chord, I take this F sharp and I move it down to E, and then I move it back up to the F sharp.
Okay, so there's no chord change. There's no chord change. It's just all happening within the same chord.
Well, again, even if I changed chords here, still kind of moving from a chord tone down and then back up, right? And you can go down and then back up like that, and that's a lower neighbor. If you went up and back down, that would be an upper neighbor. Right? Pretty easy, right?
So, as long as we're in the key of D, we're all familiar with this little thing.
Yep.
I call this faux falling. F-A-U-X.
Right. Upper neighbor note.
Upper neighbor. Returning back to there it is right there.
Yeah, that would be the upper neighbor.
And if it was a lower neighbor, what would it be?
Yep. Lower neighbor.
So.
Yeah. And these can happen in any voice, we should probably point out.
Right. Okay.
So the upper neighbor, the lower neighbor, those are actually pretty simple concepts.
Yeah, I think
to see on a page, to play, to we have these things called incomplete neighbors. And those get a little trickier.
I think I have a few of those. I might actually be one of those.
Have a few incomplete neighbors. Yeah, I think I am the incomplete neighbor in my neighborhood, to be honest. But yeah. So these are neighbor notes that don't resolve. Meaning, they step away from that chord tone like a neighbor note does, but then they don't immediately go back to that chord tone. They go to some other chord tone.
Okay.
And that sounds really complicated. We have two different types. An escape tone and an appoggiatura.
One of my favorite words.
Appoggiatura. So an escape tone moves away from the chord tone by a step. So I'm going to take this A, move it up, and then rather than moving it back down to A, it's going to resolve by some kind of leap. So it's going to go, right? So hear it move down to that G instead.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you wanted to keep it all in the same chord,
Okay.
That sounds really weird. That almost sounds like an arpeggiation, doesn't it? Sure. And then you could also do things like.
Okay, so it could be up or down.
Oh yeah. It generally is going to leap in the opposite direction that it stepped.
Approach by step and left by leap.
Yes. Appoggiatura is.
Oh, hey! Before we move on, I also have here that it normally falls on a weak beat. Is that worth mentioning?
Yeah, all of these typically fall on weak beats.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. When passing tones occur on the strong beat, they are called accented passing tones.
Okay.
Same thing for neighbor notes. When they occur on the strong beat, they're called accented neighbor notes.
Got it.
Whereas the more typical unaccented passing tones or neighbor tones,
that's just considered a passing tone or neighbor tone because
Right.
it happens more commonly.
Right. Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. So the escape tone, like we were saying, is approached by step and left by leap, typically in the opposite direction.
Right.
Now the appoggiatura
leaps away and then steps back. So we will have something that will go. So, I got that A. I'm going to leap to a non-chord tone that is then going to resolve by a step.
Great. Still on the same chord.
Oh, yeah. You can, as always, you can sort of change chords here if you want. Let me see if I do that right. Let's start with this A major chord and say, and then appoggiatura, an accented appoggiatura, because that would have been on a strong beat, right? When I changed the chord. So, oops. So there's my chord tone.
Uh-huh.
Right? Non-chord tone in the chord that was playing at simultaneously with the chord, right? Then resolving down. So I took my A, I jumped up to E over D major, and then resolved down.
So, okay.
Yeah.
Very nice.
Yeah.
So we're learning that both the escape tone and the appoggiatura can happen within chord changes or within the same chord.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And that's actually true for all of them.
Okay.
Yeah. What's important is that the dissonant chord, the non-chord tone, be dissonant to the chord that's happening while that note is going on, and its resolution need be consonant to the chord that's happening while that is going on. Right.
Very good.
So yeah.
Well, that covers I think the neighbor. The neighbor is both complete and incomplete.
Oh yeah. And escape and appoggiaturated.
Well, this is going quite well. Now, I'm anticipating this next one.
An anticipation is simply a non-chord tone that anticipates what will be a chord tone in the next chord. So if I'm moving from D major to G, if in the course of this D major, I sort of anticipate that with this G note, anticipation.
Okay.
So let's do that again.
Okay, so that one note.
Yeah, this happens a lot in guitar music where, it's easier to change, one like part of a finger position. It's easier to get one finger in the right position for the next chord before it is to get all of them, right?
So it might have come up from necessity at some point.
Yeah.
Let's see.
It might have.
So if I have an A, if I have a D.
Yeah, there you go.
So this note right there is the anticipation.
Yeah, dissonant to D, but consonant in the A to which you are going.
Very cool. Yeah, because that otherwise that would make it like a D9 chord.
Yeah.
Huh. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
and this is sort of what we mean when we say these things are melodic or linear rather than harmonic or vertical.
Right.
Because we're not really talking about a D9 chord, are we? We didn't play a D9 chord. We played D major. This is sort of something that's melodic spice, melodic embellishment that's making what we're doing more interesting.
So and also the anticipation typically happens on a weak beat, right? Leading into.
Typically, yeah.
Yeah. As do most of these.
Most of these chord tones occur on weak beats, or they will occur on the 8th note on the and, or they will occur on 16th notes. They don't typically occur on. Let's just leave it at that.
Well, I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory. The anticipation, It just kind of gives you a little teaser of the chord to come, and then is resolved when that chord comes.
Yeah, it gives you a little teaser that the chord would come. Yeah.
But at the moment that tease happens, you're having a non-chord tone moment.
Yes, you are.
A moment of anticipation.
A non-chord tone moment. I have a lot of those.
Yeah, man. Wonderful stuff.
So the anticipation's counterpart, the suspension. Are we ready for this?
I think we're ready for this.
Because this gets a little more complicated.
This is a handful.
It sounds like it's just the opposite of an anticipation, right? So instead of anticipating the next chord, you're holding over from the chord before that. So as I play D, F sharp A, D major, move to an A major chord, I'm holding that F sharp, right? And then it's resolution, and it's the resolution and suspension that occurs on weak beats typically. Moves down to that E, which is a chord tone in the A major chord to which I went. So D major chord, A major chord, what we would call an A sus6 chord with an F sharp. Then that F sharp resolves to the chord tone E. So. And I don't know about you, but I just absolutely have to hear.
Yeah, thank you.
But
You're a good man. Okay, so let's see. You're holding a note from the previous chord while all the others move to the following chord. Typically, it's resolved on a weak beat after the rest of the texture.
Yeah, typically it's resolved on a weak beat.
Okay, now it's my understanding that this non-chord actually has kind of 3 phases to it. This non-chord tone.
Right. So there's the preparation. Where the note is played as a chord tone.
Everything's cool.
Yep. The actual dissonance. Where we have an F sharp in our A chord. Right? And then the resolution, where that F sharp chord resolves to an E. So preparation. Right? Suspension. Resolution. Right.
Is that it? Ah, thank you.
Which is the resolution of the harmony, not the resolution of the suspension.
The grand resolution, the royal resolution.
Yeah, just to clear up any misconceptions. The resolution of the suspension happens when that F sharp moves down to the chord tone E. So this sounds easy.
Yeah.
The thing is, suspensions are dealt with in a very particular way. In the rules of classical harmony, suspensions must resolve down by step.
Ah.
Yes. And it's one of those rules that come about because to try to do anything else really kind of messes with your harmony and really kind of blows apart what you're trying to do. This goes all the way back to medieval counterpoint, this idea.
Okay.
But yeah, they must resolve downward by a step.
Are we getting into parallel 5th octave territory if we're trying to do otherwise? Or
yeah.
breaking some of those
we are.
conventions?
Yes, we are.
Okay, let's
sometimes if it resolves in any other way, it's... Yeah, let's just say that. We're going to be doing bad things if we do otherwise.
Bad things. Let's not do bad things.
Well, what we're going to do is be leaving dissonances unresolved. So just as, when I created this dissonance... that you wanted to hear me go like that. It's the exact same principle. If I had gone, and that didn't work, right?
No.
Yeah, and it didn't work because we left that dissonance unresolved. If you do not resolve a suspension down by a step, you are leaving a dissonance unresolved.
It was cool, but not very resolving.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Hey, here's where Matt's gonna be challenged on his on
my keyboard playing skills. Let's see what I can come up with.
Real quick, what I'd like to do is just kind of let them listen to an example of each of the common types of suspensions.
Yeah, so there's some pretty common ones. Okay. In fact, there are sort of a limited number of these. Just because hey, we only have 12 notes and 3 notes in a triad, and 3 notes that can be above those 3 notes. So there's a limited number of suspensions that happen.
This is fortunate.
This is fortunate. Do you want to go by list of most common, or do you want to?
Well,
let's just run down your list.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Okay. So, and I'll try and do them based on what I think is the most common.
Okay.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So first of all, I think one of the more common ones is 4/3.
Absolutely. And 4/3. A 4/3 suspension. All right, so I'm going to have my D major chord. And I am going to move from that to a 5/7 chord, A major. But I've suspended this D. And then I'm going to resolve it down to C sharp. So just to play that all again.
Okay.
And what I did was have a suspended note that was a fourth above the bass note. I'm in the A major chord right now. Resolving down to the chord tone that is a third above the bass note.
Okay. So 4 to 3.
So, and it really didn't matter what chord I was. I could have started this on a 6 chord. Yeah. What matters is when I suspended that D. It was a fourth above the bass.
Yep. That's exactly what I wanted to hear.
Yeah.
The resolution.
Yeah. So we're talking about intervals above the bass in the way we name these, because this is actually what 4/3 is doing. That's the figured bass. It's describing what the intervals above the bass are doing.
Okay, so just so I understand this, we're in the key of D. We're saying 4/3. We're not talking specifically about a G going to an F sharp.
No. We're not talking about scale degrees.
Okay.
And we're not talking about chord tones exactly either. What we're talking about is intervals above the bass. We prepared the note with just a note that was a chord tone.
Yep.
When we moved to A, the suspension became a note that was a fourth above our bass note.
Haha.
Which then resolved to the note that was a third above our bass note. And of course, the third above our bass note is our chord tone. So that's our resolution.
Good clarification. Cool.
Yes.
Okay, so that's 4/3. That's pretty common, okay?
4/3, very common. Very, very common. 4/3, just as a side, that's the fa mi thing. So you see this in resolutions all the time, where you're at the end of pieces of music, where you're... Yeah. Very pretty.
Very pretty. Very angelic. A side note.
Side note to our side note.
Did you see it? Yeah. Did you see the episode of The Simpsons where Ned and Maude ended up taking in Lisa and Bart because Homer and Marge went out of town and they're considered neglected?
I think so.
And there's a scene at the very end where Ned is attempting to baptize the Simpsons kids. And they're at this river and they're singing Amazing Grace. And at the very end, Ned closes it up with, "Was blind, but now I see." So Ned does the 4/3 suspension.
Yeah.
And I was studying those at the time when we were watching that. Christian and I were like,
"Hey, he did it. I had one of my ear training students once point out a 4/3 suspension that I left unresolved in one of my pieces.
Okay.
Nailed me on it. I was very proud of my student and very angry at myself.
That's killer.
But there you go.
So the 4/3. Okay, what's next?
In my opinion, probably the next most common or the next most basic, maybe the 9/8.
The 9/8 suspension.
So, and let's just so we've made it via we've made it to this A major chord, right? Let's go from this A major chord and let's resolve back. So I'm going to drop my bass an octave here just to make this a little cleaner. Nice. I'm going to resolve back to my D major. I'm going to suspend this E from my A major chord, which is a ninth above the bass note D.
Aha.
And I'm going to resolve it to an octave above the bass note D, which is this other D.
Hence the 9/8.
Hence the 9/8. So,
lovely.
Yes. Now, again, we're using 5 and 1, so our harmony is resolving a lot. All of these chord tones happen in any chord whatsoever, right? So you don't have to have a 5 and a 1 to have a 9/8 suspension or a 4/3 suspension. They happen in any chord.
Okay.
So we might be on a 2 chord that resolves to a 6 and has a 9/8 suspension resolving that 6. That 6 is going to want to go on and resolve into other places and get back to 1, right? See our Circle of Fifths episode if you have to. Don't confuse the resolution of non-chord tones with the resolution of the harmony. That's what sounds so pretty and relaxing, and we're back to normal.
Okay, so I saw when you were doing that example, you're holding down the bass note an octave away from the other chords that was happening.
Yep.
That were happening. And so we're calling it 9/8 because this is literally a compound interval. This is the ninth resolving to an 8 because this is happening in a space that exceeds or that goes beyond an octave. So if this happened an octave lower, would we not just call it a 2/1, or why wouldn't we call it a 2/1 instead of 9/8? Why are we calling it a 9/8?
If it had happened, it is partly custom.
Okay. Just jargon.
If we had, well, if it had all been happening in an octave, we had kind of wondered where our bass voice was.
Yep.
By moving our bass voice in a way that made sense, we created that ninth chord.
Yeah.
It's sort of just custom, and it's not custom that's adhered to all the time. Notice, we don't call our 14/3 and 11/10 ever.
Yeah, that would be very cumbersome.
Yeah. It's called 9/8 rather than 2/1 because because 2/1 sort of implies something weird. It implies a unison.
Right. Okay. Okay. And then the 7/6.
7/6. 7/6 is a little weird because it requires us to move to a chord in first inversion. So if I am in a second inversion 5 chord here, like a passing 6/4, so I'm playing A dominant 7, and I'm moving to
still in the key of D, right?
Still in the key of D,
Good old
and
D.
I move to a first inversion 1 chord. Which would be 1/6. Yeah. And in doing so, suspend this E, which is a seventh away from the F sharp, which is in the bass, and then resolve it down. We have a 7/6 suspension, right? So. So, nice, huh?
Yeah, very nice.
Yeah,
and just
not super common.
Yeah,
but it does happen.
And again, just to reiterate, if we haven't driven this home already, the numbers we're referring to 4/3 and 9/8. These are the intervals above the bass.
The bass.
This is not about scale steps or scale degrees.
Right, yeah.
Very good, very good.
Intervals above the bass.
Okay, let's what's next? I have here the 2/3.
Yeah, 2/3. 2/3 happens when the motion is in the bass. Right? Because what happened is that this interval of a 2, and then I'm playing D and E here in an A chord, so my suspended note is a D.
Okay.
This in the bass. Resolved down to a interval of a third when it resolved down to the C sharp. Right, so preparation. In the bass, suspension. Resolution. Right. And then, of course, I have to hear that harmony resolved. But
yeah. Cool, man.
Yeah. So whenever the second number is bigger, that's a suspension in the bass, and that's usually a 2/3.
Okay. So that's the 4 main kinds. There's one other that's mentioned a little bit that just is not really considered as dramatic, I suppose.
Right. The 6/5.
Correct.
All right, so a 6/5, yeah, less dramatic sometimes.
Yeah.
Considered less dramatic sometimes, and that's because it involves 2 notes that are both consonant. There's not really a dissonant interval involved in the 6/5. So let's get out of D major for a second. I'm tired of D major.
Hey.
Yeah, so we're in the key of G major. Now I'm going to prepare a dissonance. Here's my chord I'm going to suspend, right? I'm going to move to the 5, which is D major. unfortunately.
We couldn't get away from D major.
Suspension. Yeah. And so the bass is in D. The suspension is an interval of a sixth above that. And it resolves down by a step to the interval that is a fifth above that. So that's the 6/5 suspension.
Okay.
One more time, really quick. Preparation. Suspension. Resolution. This is these two notes, B and A, are both considered consonant above D, right?
Yeah.
This is a major sixth. This is a perfect fifth. So there are two consonances. And for that reason, it's often considered less dramatic. Some people will tell you this is not a true suspension.
Oh, would they?
Yeah, because it does not involve the resolution of a dissonance.
I see.
Right? And in fact, when I'm playing the suspended note over the bass D, what am I playing here? I'm playing D, playing another D, playing F sharp, I'm playing B. That's just a B minor chord, right?
Right.
So a lot of people will tell you that this is a B minor chord.
Oh, I see.
Moving to a D chord.
The suspension itself is almost the resolution.
Yeah.
It seems like.
Yeah. Or that, what you think is a suspension is really just a chord tone.
Just a different chord. Yeah. The chord tone, right.
Yeah, and that we're changing chords when we move this single note down like this, right? That's not personally how I prescribe to it. I consider 6/5 to be a thing.
Okay.
Because I don't feel like this is a chord change. Right?
Yeah, to me it sounded like one chord the whole time.
Yeah, and I'm going by my feeling here. It's my heart that matters, Jeremy.
Of course. Listen to your heart, Matt.
And that just doesn't feel like a chord change. It feels like if you're thinking more in terms of melodic motion and horizontal motion. But that's just me. Theorists love to argue about things like that.
But that does go back to our discussion about vertical versus horizontal.
Yeah. So there you go. Horizontal. 6/5 suspension.
Great. Let's talk a little bit about the embellished suspension.
Okay. Do we have to? Well, I mean, it's not a big deal. It's just sort of if I were to make a typical suspension and sort of add a little kind of embellishment or something like that to the resolution, we will typically call that an embellished suspension.
Yeah. Again, just what it sounds like. Instead of hitting those two notes, you're kind of.
Yeah, kind of. You'll hear that, especially like in Baroque music, like in Bach compositions, you'll hear that all the time. Like, for example, and I'm going to do a nice little 4/3 suspension here, and I'm going to embellish it a little bit.
Embellish. Okay.
There's all kinds of ways to embellish.
You're just fancifying it, making it more fancy.
Yeah, fancifying a little. Yeah, there you go.
That's enough about that. Here's another interesting thing that I think is another fancifier. A chain of suspensions.
A chain of suspensions. Yeah, well, this is just a succession of suspensions happening in one chord progression after another, usually unbroken and usually in the same voice. So, for example, if I play a D major chord here, and then I go to something fairly common, like a 5/7, and then I'm going to resolve this with a suspension in the soprano. So I'm going to go, but then I'm going to continue that. That resolution of that suspension becomes the preparation for another. So I'm going to go, right? And then I'm going to keep it going, go to the... And these are just suspensions and resolutions in every chord, right?
Consecutive. One after the other?
Yeah, just one after the other suspensions. The resolution of a suspension becomes the preparation for the next suspension, which is then resolved, and that resolution becomes the preparation for another one, etc., etc.
Very nice. Can you play that one more time, just by itself?
Yeah, one more time. So without me talking over it.
See if y'all can hear the suspensions.
Right. So D major, and we're going to go to 5/7. All right. So.
Nicely done.
Oh, thank you. Resolution of the last suspension becomes the preparation for the next one, which is a fancy music way of saying it's just one suspension after another.
More good old fancification.
Fancification. We like fancification. We're academics.
Yes, we do, and yes, we are. Okay, so the next one coming up is the retardation. Now, what exactly is that?
What it is a suspension that resolves the wrong way.
Yeah, that's funny.
Yeah, it's a suspension that resolves up. So imagine, kind of messed up.
Yeah, so the suspension tends to resolve downward, where the retardation tends to resolve upward.
Yeah, really doesn't happen in classical music. I've always heard about a retardation, and in studying classical music, I don't know that I've ever come across one. Yeah.
Can we hear that one more time? Is there a three-phase situation going on here as well?
Oh, sure. It's the same thing, preparation.
So preparation, retardation, resolution. Oh.
See?
Yeah.
Went the wrong way.
Very strange. Yeah, you wanted it to actually go down, but it went up.
Yeah. Right, yeah. All right.
Okay, we have one more type of non-chord tone.
Okay.
And this is time to and it's time to see what Matt can do with the organ.
Not much. But all right. So this is a pedal tone, I'm assuming.
This is the pedal tone.
And the pedal tone is just a note that is held in, it can be any voice, it's typically considered the bass voice, while other things go on top of it.
Okay.
So, and by other things, I mean sort of chord changes, really, going on top of it. So,
You're playing this note right here.
Yeah, and the whole time I was holding that note.
While everything else is going on around it.
Yes,
chord
exactly.
changes and melodies and so forth.
Yep, yeah. Actually goes back to before the organ was even invented. But
really? Well, that drone effect has occurred, I think, in music all over the world. So
sure, yeah.
Particularly like the sitar, you hear the Indian instrument, the sitar.
Yeah.
And then what you're doing with the organ.
Yeah.
The bagpipes.
Bagpipes, yeah.
That
Can't help
thing
but drone on the bagpipes.
One big pedal tone.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's one of my favorites. Like you hear, let's see here.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm not going to finish that. Because we're so scared of copyright.
Please don't sue us.
But the pedal tone, that's my favorite. I can't say it's my favorite, but it's certainly one of my favorites. You can't have a favorite.
Yeah, it kind of serves a completely different purpose than the rest of the non-chord tones, right? We consider it a non-chord tone because it's creating dissonances when you change the chord above it, right? In which case typically we analyze the other voices, for what they're doing, going 1, 5, 4, whatever, and sort of ignore the pedal tone voice and saying, okay, well, it's just playing that pedal tone.
And a quick note on the history of the pedal tone. I assume that's because the organists used to use, or still do, I guess, had bass pedals, right?
Yeah.
That they're using. So the whole time they're doing their thing with their left and right hand.
Sure. Yeah.
But they're holding down with their foot this pedal.
Yeah. And the organi of Renaissance music, things that they would call an organum, would have that single voice holding out that whole note while other melodies played above it.
Very cool.
Yeah. We'll talk about that one day.
One day when we have our history podcast. We're going to keep on promising it.
Yeah.
And now we have to do it.
It's our fear of being sued for copyright.
Yeah,
this is the real issue.
We're working on that.
We're working on it.
Because the last thing I want to do is have to take a podcast down after I put it up.
Oh, God,
have someone tell me to cease and desist. Man.
Oh, God, yeah. And that's all they can do. They're going to get zero money out of us. We're poor and are not making anything to do off of this. So.
Yeah. Well, man, I think that covers all of the non-chord tones.
Excellent, yeah.
And there's a lot of information there, but it really opens up the windows to what you can do.
Yeah, the descriptions of non-chord tones always sound so simple to me, and it always sounds like, wow, you're just not conveying the complexity of what's going on in a piece of music with these things, So this is one area where I recommend get out and study. If you're a music student in a college, I guarantee you at some point you're going to be given a passage of music and say, circle all the non-chord tones.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which, in fact, you're going to get very used to doing that. If you're not one of those people, get out your favorite piece of music and try to identify what you may think may be a passing tone or a neighbor tone or something like that, and just start to appreciate how many of these things there are and how much dimension they give to your music.
And at the very least, you can look at a sus2 chord and actually know what's going on now.
Yeah, you could actually look at a sus2 chord, sus2 meaning, there's a 2 above the bass, right?
Right on.
Which in classical we would call that a 9/8 suspension probably, but you get the idea.
Yeah. A quick review, shall we?
Shall we indeed?
Okay, so non-chord tone. And the cool thing is most of these things are exactly what they sound like.
Yeah. We're not trying to confuse anybody this time.
Not this time. Non-chord tone, tone being played that is alien to the chord itself.
Alien to the chord played simultaneously with it, yes.
The passing tone.
A passing tone moves between 2 chord tones, passes between them, either ascending or descending, but is itself a dissonant note.
Correct. And it goes in the same direction it was coming from.
Yeah, right. So, yeah.
And typically this is filling in the space between two notes that are a third apart.
Pretty much, yeah.
And
filling in that interval of a second between those 2 notes that are a third apart, yeah.
And in these cases, it's typically a diatonic passing tone because we're involving scale steps. Typically.
Right, yeah. Chromatic passing tones involve not scale steps, but actual chromatic notes. Right. So F to F sharp to G would be a chromatic passing tone.
Filling the space between perhaps 2 notes that are maybe a second apart.
Right.
Okay. Good enough for that, huh?
Yep.
And of course, you have accented passing tones.
Right.
Which tend to land on the downbeat.
Well, yeah, which the passing note is the downbeat. That's what we call an accented passing tone.
But it's so much less common than the typical passing tone, it has to be given a title, accented passing tone.
Yeah.
Okay. Next, the neighbor note, or the neighbor tone.
Notes. Yeah, just move away from a chord tone and move back. They can move up by a step and move directly back, which is an upper neighbor. They can move down by a step and move directly back, which is a lower neighbor.
On the topic of neighbors, you have your complete neighbors and your not so complete neighbors.
Right. Complete neighbors are what we just described. Incomplete neighbors move away from that chord tone and then are not completed. They don't move back in that way. So you have an escape tone, which will step away from a chord tone and cause a dissonance, and then leap to another note that is consonant in the chord, in whatever chord it's in at that point. And then its opposite is an appoggiatura, which will leap away and then step back into a resolution. Right. Leap to a dissonance and then step back to a resolution.
And these are happening in opposite directions, right? So in the escape tone, it's approached by a step and left by a leap in the opposite direction.
Right, yeah. So if you stepped down, you'll leap up.
And like a lot of these, the escape tone typically occurs on a weak beat.
Right. I like to keep these 2 straight in my mind. I like to think of an appoggiatura as being like an arpeggio.
Hey.
So it's leaping, but then it leaps to something dissonant, so it's got to step down.
Yeah.
And then an escape tone, it's like escaping. You escape by stepping up to the window and then leaping out.
Leaping out. Hey, that's great, man. The only other, in appoggiatura, the only other long A Italian word that sounds like arpeggio.
Right.
Probably not the only one, but the only one I know of now at this point. So there's the neighbor notes.
Right.
And the anticipation.
Anticipation just sort of anticipates the chord that's coming up by moving away to a dissonance that is, in fact, a note that's going to be a chord tone when the chord changes.
Right. Okay, so...
Just like you said, it's anticipating the chord.
It anticipates a pitch from the following chord.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay, and then the suspensions.
The suspension is kind of the most complicated one. And nominally, it is holding a note over from the last chord when the chord changes, and then resolving that held over note. The thing is, suspensions have to resolve downward by step. So we have a few typical ones. The 4-3, called so because it is an interval of a fourth above the bass note, resolving to an interval of a third above the bass note in that final chord.
Uh-huh.
Right?
Yeah.
And then we have the 9-8, which is the interval of a ninth resolving down to an octave above the bass. Right? And we have the 7-6, an interval of a seventh resolving to a sixth above the bass. Obviously, if you're talking about a sixth above the bass, you need generally some kind of first inversion chord. Mm-hmm. It's not a root position chord. And then we have the 2-3, which is weird because that's when the suspension is in the bass.
And why is the second number higher in this particular instance?
The second number is higher because the interval is getting wider.
Yeah. Great. Oh, cool. And then the 6-5. Did we talk about that?
Yeah, and then there's the 6-5. That is the one that some people don't consider to be a true resolution because it involves nothing but consonant notes. But it's an interval of a sixth above the bass. Again, in that last chord that we went to, resolving down to the note that's a fifth above the bass.
So where some would argue there's actually just a chord change occurring.
Some would argue that it's actually just a chord change, that this is actually just consonant chord tone motion, not really a resolution. But I personally like to consider a 6-5 a suspension.
You believe in the 6-5.
I believe in the 6-5 as a suspension.
And the suspensions, of course, we also should mention they typically have three phases.
Yeah.
That would be the preparation.
Playing the first chord.
The suspension.
Playing the second chord and holding that one note, suspending it.
And the resolution.
Resolving that suspended note down to a chord tone in the new chord.
Very good. And of course, there's embellishments where you're doing multiple.
Yeah, where you can do little dealies around them, right?
Fancifying.
Yeah.
And then there's the chain of suspensions, which is super cool.
Yeah.
Okay, and then the retardation is a suspension figure that resolves upward, which is kind of rare. Correct.
Right.
Pretty rare.
Yeah.
That's probably what I was trying to talk about earlier.
Yeah, that's kind of what you were trying to talk about.
Well, we'll go with that, huh?
Yeah, we'll go with that. You mean a retardation.
Yes, I knew what I was talking about. And then we had some fun. We switched to the organ, and we
discussed the pedal point,
talked about
which is just one note held as sort of in drone style over chord changes.
And when that's occurring, do you if you're analyzing, should we share your thoughts on analyzing a pedal point?
Yeah, when that's occurring, you analyze those chord changes above the pedal point as if you were just analyzing in three voices or something. You don't include the pedal voice in your analysis.
Okay, it's kind of
you just consider it a non-chord tone that's lasting forever.
Very cool. Wow. All right, man. So there you have it, non-chord tones.
Yeah, fun stuff, huh?
Fun stuff. What's after this? Where do we go from here?
Oh shoot, I don't know. We're gonna start talking about key changes at some point.
Very cool. Well, listen for that. And thanks again, Jesse, for writing in. And guys, continue to engage us and ask questions, and we'll go ahead and address them. We're really enjoying this.
Thanks again for listening. Don't forget, our website, musicstudent101.com, is a great companion to each episode. And for questions and comments, Email us at info@musicstudent101.com.